Okay, so welcome everybody to our third Childhood and Society Special Interest Group seminar on childhood of the Anthropocene. So today's focus is on eco-pedagogies in our commitment to propose pedagogy sensible to the current global challenges, to reconsider thinking on children and childhoods in a broader sense, to think critically with children and not to do research on children by promoting a childlike engagement with the world. So we are very pleased and honored to have today with us two scholars, actually closely connected to our education department too. So we got Professor Federico Farini from the University of Northampton, and Mari Istanes Fjellstad from the Norwegian Academy of Music. The titles of Federico's talk is The Environment, Resources, Context, or Both, while the title of Mari's talk is Missing Stinker and Bouncing Bows, Material Agency in Music Education. Okay, so start with Federico.
Okay, so yeah. Try to share. Well, I share my screen. It worked, so should work again, hopefully. Okay. Okay, can you see it okay?
Yeah.
Okay, so when you're ready, Abele, I will...
Yes, please. Yeah.
Okay, so first of all, thank you, Abele, for inviting me today. And thank you, Abele, also for organizing this series of seminars. And thanks to Angela and Jane, because they are your partner in these intellectual endeavors. So, and I will not invest more than a few seconds to introduce myself. My name is Federico Farini. I'm a professor of sociology, University of Northampton, where I lead the Center for Psychology and Social Sciences. I used to work at Middlesex, and almost 10 years ago, I spent 2 good years at Middlesex, where I learned a lot, and professionally, personally, and then I moved somewhere else, and I'm here today. So I would say that introducing myself is also important, because in a way, my role as a lead of the Center for Psychology and Social Sciences inspired me and inspired my presentation today. And particularly with regard to psychology, my background, or at least on paper, I'm an anthropologist. So this is what I studied. And my first years as a researcher were within the field of anthropology, particular cultural anthropology, what in England we call normally social anthropology. And what's the link with psychology? The link is that probably the strongest influence on me as an anthropologist was the American-based, although the most important figure, Gregory Bateson, was British, the American-based school of culture and personality that try to understand culture through the tools of psychology, and to understand psychology through the tools of cultural anthropology. And I'm saying that because you will see that in my presentation, I kind of imitate, and the style of the authors within the tradition of culture and personality. For instance, borrowing knowledge and experiences from different disciplines, and in particular today from philosophy and from classic philology. So let's start. Let's have a look. Let's be very practice, and let's read together and the EYFS statement that describes the enabling environment. So what is an enabling environment? This is a quote The enabling environment is a rich, stimulating, and safe space offering opportunities to play, to be, to learn, and to explore both physically and mentally. So I would advance some critical remarks, okay? First of all, a safe space offering possibility to explore. Let me be an anthropologist here. Safe and exploring doesn't sound quite right to me. The archetypical idea of exploring for Western culture, the Odyssey, and the pillar of the Odyssey is the theme of the nostos. Nostos, what is the nostos? Is the return home after a long journey, but a long journey of exploration that is not safe. Safety prevents that change, that elevation of identity that is entailed in the return home. James Joyce, for instance, calls the last section of Ulysses, to me the greatest novel of the 20th century, call it nostos, the idea of returning home. Although I don't know if Leopold Bloom elevated himself through his journey. But this is the point. Safety, exploration. Safety, change. Can they go together? According to the YFS, yes, and they are a cornerstone of the enabling environment, but I would have some critical remarks about that. So we can continue. We stay with the simple, short rather than simple sentence, and we can practice some quite common methodology initially in history, then in social sciences, which is the archaeological investigation. You know, of course, the reference to Foucault is quite obvious, and in my opinion, that methodology, the archaeology of knowledge, has been often misunderstood. Okay, I've never been sure about the influence of Nietzsche on Foucault, but I quite agree with that mainstream interpretation, the canonical idea that Nietzsche enabled Foucault to do what? To understand culture, meanings as dependent on the social context. Okay, so it is not an history of knowledge in the sense of finding the roots of the concept that we use today. It's an history of knowledge, a genealogy in the Nietzsche sense of understanding concept with reference to the social context from where those concepts emerge. Okay, so enabling environment is a rich, stimulating, and safe space offering opportunities to play. This sentence. Okay, so if we do a bit of archaeological investigation, what do we find? I think that we find what Foucault called the énoncé, the statement. Okay, which is what are the statement. The énoncé are the conditions that make any expression meaningful. Okay, so what are the conditions that make this expression meaningful, particularly because it is widely contradictory in the terms of safety and exploring, safety and changing. Okay, so to me, the énoncé is the idea that the safety and exploration can coexist as long as they are, of course, as long as they are happening in an environment that is controlled. Okay, so is a change which is controlled, therefore limited. Is a stimulation, it is controlled, therefore limited. It is a play that is controlled, therefore limited. It is a learning that is controlled, therefore limited. So what is the énoncé here? What makes the expression, the sentence in front of us, intelligible? What makes that sentence making sense in a way? The safe space offering, so children finding what it is offered to them. This is the point. Opportunities to play, to be, to learn, to explore, both physically and mentally, the stimulation, it is offered. Okay, so the énoncé, the context that makes the sentence intelligible, and we can bring a slightly trivial use of Bourdieu's, the idea of field. So the énoncé is an adult-centric field. You know, field is the social space where there are different actors that compete for the appropriation of status. You can see adults and children. Okay, so the énoncé here is a field and connotated by a hierarchical relationship where adults enable children to the environment. So the adult is the demiurge, okay? The producer, the maker. This is the Plato concept. You know, the contact between Plato's demiurge, the idea that the creation, so the world is created, and the contact with Aristotle's energeia, which means that the world develops fueled by energy, but without a single mind that orders it, okay? So we can see the Platonic underpinning of the concept of enabling environment in the EYFS, which is not surprising due to the massive influence of Platonic thinking in the British academia and education, okay? Which is not positive or negative. It is my genealogic in terms of genealogy of knowledge statement, okay? This is probably the most, in my opinion, well, I found this the most interesting point of my argument. And we start then from this énoncé, and where enabling environment makes sense only within a field, a social context, where adults, through a positive action, transform a previously non-enabling environment for children, adults as enablers. There is this very nice Aristotle concept, again, go back to Aristotle, it's called entelekia. Entelekia is a beautiful concept that comes from a beautiful word, in my opinion, which is exis. What is exis in Greek? Is a single word that expresses a beautiful concept, which is being at work, doing things, staying the same. So this idea of activities, work, change, that goes in circle, going back to the initial state. Entelekia, being at work, staying the same. I see education a bit, I think that entelekia can describe what education does. A lot of work, a lot of change, a lot of critical remarks, a lot of reflection, self-reflection, a lot of debate. And what happens is that education remains the same, in the sense education as a field. So as a space where social actors interact. And when I say stay the same in the sense of the positions of adults and children, which stays within the, you know, hierarchical relationship. Hierarchical can be a hierarchy in terms of knowledge. Someone knows more and better than someone else, and the one who knows more and better is legitimized then to transmit knowledge to the one who knows less. Entelekia, by the way, and to close the circle, again, going back in circle, takes us back to the Odyssey, okay? And, well, the Odyssey is all about nostos, okay? Traveling, exploring, to change, to go, returning home, changed, okay? This is a very quick note in the margin. So what happened is that when Odysseus returns to Ithaca, no one recognizes him because he's disguised as a beggar, and then he spent 20 years away from home, war, and then the Odyssey. And his old friends, servant, Eumaeus, doesn't recognize him. Who are the only ones who recognize Ulysses? Two sets of female eyes. His servant and Euryclea, who recognizes Odysseus from a scar that he carries on his leg, and his dog Argos, who is very, very old at that time. And because we know Argos is a he in the Odyssey. However, we know the Greek culture, the parallelism between dog and female. I don't want to do philology here. Of course, it's not that the parallelism between dog and female, that when the first woman was created by Hephaestus, Hermes, Mercury, said, oh, I'm going to put in this woman kinos nous, which means a dog's mind. That does not describe the reality of women in Greece. That was a myth invented to justify inequality and to justify the male dominance on female. But what is interesting for us is that the female gaze recognizes Odysseus, okay, which connects, of course, to the role of the women in education, particularly with young children. So I would park in the final part of my presentation. I would park the enabling environment. I'm not interested in it. I'm not going to work to save the expression, okay? I'm not going to try changing the énoncé to save the expression. I'm going to propose a different one, okay? I would like to do things with words, pragmatism. Austin is the British philosopher who created the second major tradition of linguistics. There is structuralism and pragmatism. Pragmatism is the idea that words do not describe only, they also do things. They also create a reality we move within, okay? So in order to propose a different approach to the environment, I'm going to do something with words to invent a new expression, environment that enable. I have to say that I have to thank Angela Scollan, who is attending today, because we have co-constructed this concept. We have published something, still developing. And so environment that enable. Let's go back to the YFS. So the YFS is written in your slide, describe the environment in terms of, there are three dimensions of the environment: the emotional environment, the outdoor environment, the indoor environment. I would like to focus on the first one, the emotional environment, as a sort of case study, okay? So the emotional environments relates in a way to the Reggio Emilia idea that the environment is not only physical, the environment is made of relationships as well. It's called pedagogia relazionare, pedagogy of relationship, okay? So here the YFS gives us material to build the concept of environment that enable. If we, what I'm suggesting now, focus on the environment as a network of relationship and interaction rather than a space, okay, then it is the network that enable. And who is in the network? Who makes the network? If it's a network, if it's not a built environment, built in the sense of constructed by the adults, demiurge, but if it is understood as a network or relationship, children as well, who are in that social space, unavoidably co-construct the environment. Incidentally, to me, this is the basic dimension of agency, okay? So we know the Buber's idea of the I-thou relationship, where the I recognizes the thou not as an object, but as a subject, as another I, and therefore unavoidably recognizes the thou, the other, as a maker as well. okay? And that's the basic of a dialogical relationship. And that is what I mean with the involvement of children as co-maker of the environment as they participate in that environment. So we can try to build, therefore, the énoncé, so the context that can give meaning to the expression environment that enable. Okay, so the environment that enable as an expression becomes meaningful in a context where children are perceived as co-constructor of this social space, therefore as they are recognized as autonomous constructor authors of knowledge. Okay, this is something I'm very familiar with. This is the Reggio Emilia approach, not only because I studied it, also because I actually went as a child to one of those institutions. Okay, not in the margin, and I would like to have time for another presentation. And the idea that Malaguzzi and the Reggio approach was influenced by Froebel, Montessori, I don't think it's true. There are two influences on Malaguzzi: Gramsci's praxis, so transforming ideas into practice, and Giovanni Gentile actualism, the idea that individuals express themselves only when they work with others. So the communist philosopher, Gramsci, and a fascist philosopher, Gentile. These are the two influences in Malaguzzi, in my opinion. And so the environment as a context, and I'm about to close my presentation within the 20 minutes, maybe a few seconds more. So of course there is not time for a conceptual discussion around agency. So I would take as uncontroversial the most influential definition of agency in child studies from Moza. So agency entails the possibility for children to respond, mitigate, resist abuse about the world within the social condition they find themselves. So there is action, respond, mitigate, resist. There is perspectives, ideas, views, and there is the social context included. Okay, so again, this definition of agency fits very well with the idea of environment that enable as a social space. Okay, environment that enable, and this is my last minute, is not a resource. Okay, but it's not a resource in the current sense of something that can be used like the human resources. It's not a consumable. Okay, but becomes a resource. Therefore, it is context and a resource. If we go back to the original word, the Latin resurgo, rising again, environments that enable allows the condition for agency to rise again and again and again and again through interaction where children are positioned as co-constructor of knowledge. Okay, so as a final comment, I'm kind of stretching a lot in a metaphorical use the slave-master relationship in Hegel. Okay, so the slave, in Hegel, validates his life as he becomes fully aware of his place in the world. The master cannot validate his life outside the role as master. And that's the same, in a way, in a metaphorical sense, for the adult-children relationship. Okay, so the recognition of a child as the other I, the though, is key for adult self-consciousness. Okay, of course, the link between Freire and Hegel, self-consciousness, should be a matter for more discussion, but time is a scarce resource. So I'm closing here my presentation. This is my email. You might have noticed there are a few references which I'm not going to leave in a slide because we didn't have time to read it. If you're interested in any of my references, please email me, and that's the email for you. Thank you very much.
Many thanks, Federico. Very inspiring talk. Now hand over to Mari and her violin. for our second session.
Thank you. And thank you, Professor Federico Farini, for that most interesting talk. And I really do like the concept of environments that enable, and it ties well with the topic of my talk. So my name is Mari Ystanes Fjellstad. I'm a violin teacher, and I will be teaching violin right after this session, actually. I'm also a PhD student at the Norwegian Academy of Music, and I do research on music education, and in particular violin lessons. And I think through feminist new materialist and post-human theories. And let me see there. Yeah, so my talk is titled Missing Stickers and Bouncing Bows, Material Agency in Music Education. And this title relates to my experience as a violin teacher. So stickers, I will show you. I don't have stickers on my violin, but beginning students will have stickers often showing where to put your fingers, and those stickers go missing. And also the stick of the violin bow's ability to bounce. They all take part in how to play the violin, and I would say they are agencies playing. And I will tell you two stories about them today. In music education research, we mostly pay attention to humans, to human intentions and human agency. I find that feminist new materialist and post-human theories create possibilities for also paying attention to the agency of matter and to explore what that agency does and how it shapes education. So today I will tell you two stories that bring you into two violin lessons, and I will dissect those stories through the agental realism of Karen Barad. And the one thing I want you to bring with you after my talk is more awareness and maybe also more curiosity towards how the relationship between human and our intentional agency, and not intentional agency as well, and material agency, how those two interact. The relationship between what we want and how we speak about doing it and how we do it, and the non-humans also doing things. And I would argue that matter, like violins and stickers and bows, do not only shape what humans can and cannot do. I will argue that matter does agency, and that we, as humans, by taking notice of the interactions of humans and non-humans, might become more response-able, become more able to respond to and be responsible for our part in the world's becoming. I will explain this shortly, but first I will tell you a story. So this story takes place in a classroom, very similar to the one you can see behind me. It involves a teacher. She's a woman about my age. She's also quite similar to me. And a student, an 8-year-old girl, and a violin, and some missing stickers. So I was seated in the back of the room. I was listening to the teacher. She was tuning the violin of the student. And from the lessons I've listened to before, I knew that this teacher and this student normally worked on the student's posture. They were working on the student to stand tall, with a long and nice back, having a good balance in her body, and holding the violin and the bow. Here you go, said the teacher, and she handed the violin and bow to the student. So the girl, she raised her violin, and she placed the bow on the string. And then the teacher breathed in and out. And as the teacher did so, the student as well, and her shoulders also fell down. And then the teacher carefully shaped the bow hold the way she held her violin bow. And she looked at the position of the feet and she said, "Very well. Please play me a D major scale." So the student started playing. And the first two notes was she was confidently playing like I expected her to. And then the next two notes was totally out of tune, and I could tell by the way she looked that she could tell that something was off. But she continued. Those two she looked quite happy with, and then and the student just rushed through the scale and hoping to get it done quickly, but she was clearly not happy with how she played. And sitting at the back of the room, I was puzzled as well. Normally, she played perfectly in tune. You see, I lost them, she told the teacher. You lost your stickers? The teacher replied. Yeah, I opened the violin case and they were gone. Well, do you need some new stickers, you think? Or could we try playing without them? New stickers. Okay. And the teacher turned away and she started looking for some new stickers among her things. But then she said, But actually, if you don't have stickers and you play, is there any way you could tell if you're playing the correct pitch or not without stickers? I don't know. What is it that decides if the pitch is correct or not? The teacher asked. The fingers? Yeah, the fingers. It's kind of the fingers, the teacher continued. You put the fingers on the string to make the pitch. But how do we know if the pitch is correct? By looking at the stickers? The student was clearly confused and she had no idea what the teacher wanted her to reply. So the teacher helped a bit more. Do you smell the sound? Ah, no, I listen to the sound. I can tell by listening, the student said. Yeah, teacher replied. We listen to the pitch, so let's try working on listening. Maybe you could learn to play without stickers today. So the lesson continued. And there were no more talk about body posture that lesson. The teacher and the student spent the rest of the lesson listening to a scale, singing a scale, playing a scale. And by the end of the lesson, the student played perfectly in tune, without stickers. So, how could this story become something more than just a story? How could it inform our thinking of not only violin lessons, but of educational practices? I think it could do so by being diffracted through the agental realist philosophy of Karen Barad. So agental realism, this is just a short intro, it's theory that builds on insights from quantum physics and postmodernism and critical social theories. And agental realism does not, like many other realist philosophies, argue that the world is made up of pre-existing units or entities, like already existing violins and students and teachers, or of smaller items like atoms or electrons. But neither does agental realism argue, like social constructivism does, that the world is made or constructed and mediated through social or cultural expressions, like language. So according to agental realism, the world is becoming, it's a performative notion or understanding of the world through interactions. And interactions are actions happening within a phenomena. So it's an alternative to interactions that assume that the actions happen between already existing units. On an agental realist account, the world is materializing, it's performatively becoming through interactions, so that the world is not already there, nor constructed, but interactively becoming. And it's beyond the scope of this talk to go into all the concepts of agental realism, but I will pick one of them, agency, and I will read the story with the agental realist concept of agency. So Barad argues that agency is not aligned with human intentionality. So they say that to do agency does not require to have an intention of what that action will produce. Rather, agency is the capacity to interact, to take part in the ongoing materialization of the world, and to make a difference in that materialization, taking part. So in agental realism, agency is not something to be had. It's not a trait, not something you have. It is something you do. And the doing of agency could be done by both humans and non-humans. So when thinking of the story I just told you and the agental realist notion of agency, and when thinking those through one another, it becomes easier to grapple with the relationship between the teacher's intentions. She had intentions of working on posture and hold, and the agency of the student. She didn't want to try to play without stickers, and the agency of the stickers that had gone missing. And it's not that the intentions of the teacher or the student is not important. They did not disappear. But by thinking through the notion of non-human agency, the stickers also took part in the materialization and enactment of the lesson, and in creating a lesson where the main focus was not body posture, but intonation. And another layer of interaction between intention and human agency and non-human agency was added later on, when I was talking to the teacher and I asked her about this situation. And she told me that she preferred her students to play without stickers from the start. But as many of her students had too short lessons and practiced too little at home with too little support from their parents, she used stickers to help them quicker be able to play a simple melody so that they could become more motivated to practice. And so although she believed that the student would benefit from playing without stickers from the start, she found them useful in those specific situations. And that way it becomes clear that the stickers are interacting not only with the violin and the student and the teacher, but also with sociocultural structures, with economies and how we structure the world, and the factors deciding how long a lesson is. So by telling this story and by reading it through agental realist notions of agency, it becomes possible to be attentive to how matter matters, how things take part in the becoming of music education, and how things take part in the becoming of possible musical futures for children. But to make the interactions of capitalist economies and music education a bit more explicit, I will tell another story. And this story is from my own days as a music student. So as a student in higher music education, I always dreamt of playing in a professional orchestra. And to do so, you must win the audition. And to win the audition, you must play the first movement of a violin concerto by Mozart. And you must play the 16th notes perfectly. And to play those notes perfectly means to play with the exact amount of bounce. And I'm really out of playing shape, but it's like, you can see the bow is bouncing. And you need to have exactly the right bounce. So as a music student, I practiced countless hours trying to get those right. I studied in Berlin for 1 year, and I came to my teacher's flat and played the Mozart concerto for him twice a week for a year, almost a year. And he was never happy. Never happy at all. But one week, I think it was a Tuesday, I came to him, I started playing, and he didn't stop me. Normally he would stop me right after the second 16th note, but he continued. I got to play the whole movement for the first time. And then he said, You must have practiced well. Good girl. Thanks, I said. And I didn't tell him that I hadn't practiced at all that week. Instead of practicing, I'd been traveling around Berlin trying out new bows. And to that lesson, I brought an exquisite and very expensive bow. And it was this one. So it was not practicing, it was shopping that made him happy with how I played. And this bow is 70 years old. It is made by R. Dotchkyle. The bow stick is made of Brazil wood or Purmabuco. It's a tree that is in danger of extinction due to excessive harvesting. And the frog, this bit, is actually made of the shell of a turtle, also a species in danger of extinction. And it's decorated with gold, a material that has a long and complex and gruesome history connected to global trade and colonialism and capitalism. And how could I afford this amazing bow that enhanced my chances of playing the correct way and to get a job as a professional violinist? I had inherited money. Speaking of my family's wealth and the social classes I'm part of. So when I played the 16th note to my teacher's satisfaction, it is wrong to say it was me, meaning an individual human with an independent existence in the world that played. It was me as a phenomenon, an entanglement of human and non-human agencies, including the wood the stick is made of, and capitalism and colonialism and my family's class. And when thinking of me not as an individual violin-playing human, but as an entanglement of interacting human and non-human agencies, my participation in the making and remaking of social and cultural and economic structures become visible. I take part in the making and remaking of these structures, regardless of my intentions. I take part in the world's becoming and in the making and remaking of the structures that also include the extinction of species and colonialism. And this is a quite discouraging thought at first, but in that thought and in that insight, there is also a lot of hope for better futures, because by telling stories, by diffracting them through a gentle realism, by noticing the interactions of human intentions and agencies and non-human agency, we might gain insight in how the world is becoming and what the world is becoming. And these insights hold the potential to change how the world is becoming and what the world is becoming, to make the world differently, more just, more livable, more enjoyable, more sustainable. So I think that stories like the ones I tell makes it possible to grapple with how matter take part in violin playing and how material agency interact with human agency and human intentionality, and creating possibilities and impossibilities for learning and playing music. Because all music educators, we kind of agree that music is good. Music is good for you. And we share an intention of making music education accessible to all children. But by paying attention to the agency of matter, we might move beyond that intention, those good intentions, and also discuss how music education produce different possibilities and impossibilities for different students. And when we do so, when we understand more of how this happens, we are in a better position to change it. And by focusing on non-human agency, I do not say that humans are less important or that we have less responsibility. On the contrary, I'm saying that when taking material agency into account in our research and in our educational practices, when relating to it as an important part of the world's becoming, and not only as interruptions and coincidences or trying to ignore it, then it becomes possible to take more responsibility for our part in the becoming of the world. In short, we become more responsible, more able to respond. So I started this talk by saying that the one thing I want you to take with you is a heightened awareness of and attention towards the relationship between human intentions and material agency. Matter is not passive. Matter does agency, and to be responsible, to respond in a responsible way to these doings is important for researchers and for educators. So I hope that my stories might inspire you to become even more attentive to how these agencies take part in the becoming of the research and the educational settings that you participate in. So, thank you very much for listening to me.
Many thanks, Mary. Very inspiring indeed. We'll definitely be looking at violence bows in a different way. But anyhow, yeah, we'll definitely learn a lot from your seminar and the Federico seminar today about how matter matters, but also of course the environment. So new enlightening perspective that will definitely be beneficial for all of us. So lots of food for thought. Do you have questions? Let me see if any on the chat. I just got people say thank you. Thanks to both of you for your very interesting talks, very wonderful and provoking presentations, interesting analysis of your illustrative stories. Any questions? Any one of you particularly interested in the topic we covered? Jane and Angela. Jane? Are you muted, I think?
Yeah, no, I just unmuted.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Yeah, what incredible contributions. Thank you both very much. I have the pleasure of knowing Mari's work slightly more intimately than Federico's, as I've been working with her on her PhD project. So I've had the pleasure of engaging with even more stories. And I just think what you did was incredibly powerful, and actually for those new to agential realism and thinking about agency in other ways, you kind of broke it down in a way that underlined the political significance of the work and the difference it can make in practical terms. And the thing that for me connected, there were many connections, but one of the things that connected those presentations in my engagement with them was this idea of environment and children's relationalities within and to environments, and that the environment is never something out there. It's not a separate entity. It's not nature. It's not a resource. It has its own agency. And we have a real responsibility, to borrow from Berard and also Haraway, to think carefully through our research and our teaching and our education, what that might mean. And I think that that makes demands of us that put us in places that can feel very uncomfortable, but that's kind of the point. So I don't really have a question so much as just to thank you both so much for kind of provoking that kind of that questioning in our minds, and then also thinking very practically about how that manifests in what we then do. And I think, you know, Federico, yours was very philosophical, and Mari, yours was obviously framed by Berard. And I think too often theory and philosophy doesn't find expression. And I think both of you illustrated really powerfully just the difference it can make when you mobilize theory in a way that's useful. So they're just my thoughts, my reflections, what came to me as I was listening intently on what you both had to say. So please feel free to respond to that, but I don't have a probing question for either one of you.
Okay, thank you. Jane, Angela?
Yes, hi, thank you. Thank you, Federico and Mari. Wonderful, really provoking presentations from both of you. And again, just as Jane was saying, there's so many connections. I think I need to get you both in a room for an hour and just go for it. But what really came out from both presentations, and again, just as Jane was saying, it's not really a question as such, they're just like reflections, but the idea that the environments that enables and matter that enables or not, either of them might enable or not, and them not being passive, so the matter and the environments aren't, they're not passive entities, but the idea that us adults, particularly from those of us that come from a professional or a practice-based, when we've worked with children and families, or maybe as researchers as well, we can become quite egocentric about what we perceive the environment or matter to be, and we place it in our world, in our realities, but actually it's having that space and time to think beyond it and see them differently, and not from the egocentric kind of position that us adults have, because I know when you're busy in practice sometimes with children, to have that space to think differently and outside of what we do can be tricky, because it's hard to think out of the inherited norms, which I think Federico, your presentation really provoked us to think about. And then Mari, when we thought about what the children were missing or what they wanted, and how us adults use things, and to look outside of that. And I think that was really provocative from both. So thank you so much. If you've got any comments on that.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so I hope my microphone is on, because again, my institution, we don't use Zoom, so I think it's okay. Yes, that might just a comment to what James and Angela's very kind appreciation. Is always good to be appreciated. I don't deny it. We work in an environment where appreciations are rare. Okay, and so thank you for the generosity. Yeah, but that's about. I would like to go back 30 seconds to the field of discipline of cultural anthropology. The first definition of culture was an English chap called Taylor, not Taylor, Taylor, T-Y-L-O-R. The first definition of culture is that culture includes knowledge, beliefs, art, law, morals, custom, and any other capability that the man wrote 150 years ago, that the man acquire not naturally, but as a member of society. So we can forget the acquisition bit, which is debatable. But the first bit is quite interesting, because we can really use that as a metaphor of the idea of the environment is more than a space, is more than a resource. Environment does include relationship, okay? And when Taylor mentioned beliefs, arts, morals, custom, this is the language of someone writing in 1871. So we need to contextualize, of course. But what he meant is that culture includes not only the artifacts, but also the so-called moral dimension, which includes, if we do a bit of philology, also the aspect of relationship. So the idea of the environment being more than a space, can say a social space, in the sense that there is a room for relationship, for objects, for nature, for others, for the meaning, for how we understand others, and so on. So yes, I absolutely believe that we agree on that idea, which is an important point for a seminar. So to returning home with a shared idea of environment as much more than a collection of silent resources that can be either activated or not. It is much more in an environment. Okay. Thank you for your appreciation.
Okay, Mari, any sort of final considerations from you? I mean, because yours is a great approach, and I'm very curious, because we don't have time, unfortunately, but anyhow, I wanted maybe to know something as well about the environment, you know, where you work and you teach. I mean, how is actually violin teaching, you know, in Norway, in your experience, and to what extent is or can be enjoyable, you know, because we know, unfortunately, I mean, I'm talking about my experience because my daughter's, you know, studies violin, my brother is a violinist, and so on and so forth. But we know that in any case, it's not something that usually seen, at least perceived as an enjoyable activity, you know. In terms that
It's
learning
highly
the
enjoyable.
instrument is very, very hard indeed. I don't know whether there's an instrument, you know, more challenging than violin to learn anyhow.
Oh, I find it highly enjoyable to teach children, and also that they often find joy in working hard. So we are working hard together while enjoying ourselves. So I don't know, it's there are many structural and economic and social factors shaping education in every aspect, but yeah, to sum up, it's highly enjoyable. I will be playing with 2 small girls shortly, and I know I will enjoy myself.
Great.
And also thank you for the kind words. I must remember to say thank you.
Thank you.
Can you say, Mari, something about environment though? Because I think you were some of what you were saying, particularly about the composition and heritage and the material discursive qualities of your bow. You know, environment is not just the classroom or the space, but it's so much more confederate than that. And I just wondered if you wanted to say something about that.
Yeah, I'm thinking more and more of strings and knots and how there are connections more than stable environments, and that those connections might be more or less important in different contexts and in different situations. And in some cases, the environment of the child at home is very important because there's so many things that could affect them, and in other cases it's not. So I don't know, it's very specific, and it's very much about relations and strings.
Okay. Great. Thank you. So I think we're going to close now, and many thanks again for this very inspiring presentation. I want just to remind you that our next seminar will be on the 20th of February. We'll have a presentation by Dr. Alison Warren, and the title is Difficult Dialogues to Critical Multilogues, Post-Human Encounters in Bicultural Teaching and Learning in an Early Childhood Setting in Aotearoa, New Zealand. So looking forward to seeing you on the 20th of February as well, and many thanks again to you all, and see you next time.